Hey everyone, welcome back to Psychology Hub. I'm Alex James, a clinical psychology doctorate student, and today's video is one that's close to my heart. We're going to dive into something that affects so many of us: relationships. But not just the typical how to fix a relationship kind of advice. Instead, I want us to approach this with a fresh perspective. Almost like you're seeing your relationship through the eyes of a completely objective observer. Trust me, doing this can be a game changer when you're trying to figure out whether to stay or go. Introduction. Why we need objectivity in relationships. You know, as a therapist, I've heard so many people talk about their relationships. I hear about their ups, their downs, their highs, and their lows. And sometimes, I want to shake them. Like, look, can't you see what's happening here? But of course I can't. I can't tell people what to do, no matter how strongly I might feel about the situation. But that got me thinking, what if we could all take a step back and look at our relationships objectively, like a third-party observer, and just see the facts? If you've ever been in a relationship, you know how easy it is to get emotionally swept up. Whether it's infatuation, love, or even resentment, emotions cloud our judgment, making it tough to make decisions that are best for us in the long run. So what happens when we try to look at our relationship with a clinical, objective eye? What if we could remove the emotions from the equation, look at the facts, and ask ourselves hard questions like, is this relationship going to work long-term? Are there clear patterns that suggest we're not as compatible as we thought? When I look back on my past relationships, I wish I'd done this earlier. I spent so much time rationalizing things, justifying behavior I didn't feel right about, and ultimately wasting a lot of time. I wanted to believe things would get better. But if I'd just analyzed things more objectively from the start, I could have spared myself a lot of pain. And that's why I'm here today, because I want to help you see how a little bit of distance and perspective can help you make better decisions when it comes to relationships. The power of objectivity. So, before we get into the nitty-gritty of this exercise, I want to emphasize something important. This isn't about shutting down your emotions or pretending you don't feel things. Emotions are a huge part of why we get into relationships in the first place. But when it comes time to make decisions, especially difficult ones, you have to balance emotion with logic. It's about understanding what's going on in your relationship on a deeper level, beyond the surface-level feelings. Now, let's break this down with a series of questions. These are the same ones I'd ask clients when they're uncertain about the future of their relationship. They're designed to help you separate the emotional from the factual and give you a clearer view of what's really happening. 1. How did your relationship start? Let's start at the very beginning. Think back to when you first met your partner. How did the relationship start? Who initiated it? Did it feel like an organic connection, or was there something more circumstantial behind it? Did you both enter the relationship with clear intentions, or were you just going with the flow? For example, in one of my past relationships, I could have said, "He asked me out." But looking back, I realized the real story was that I was upset he had asked someone else to prom. It wasn't just about him asking me out. It was about a reaction to another situation. When we're emotionally invested, it's so easy to overlook these details, but it's crucial to get the facts right. 2. The honeymoon phase. How long did it last? Next, let's talk about the honeymoon phase. This is that magical time when everything feels perfect and the relationship seems like it can't go wrong. It's the time where you're both on your best behavior and everything is fresh and exciting. Typically, This phase lasts about 6 months, but sometimes it can last longer. Does that mean the relationship is built to last? Not necessarily. But if it's shorter than that, say, just a few weeks or a couple of months, it's time to start paying attention. Early problems are big red flags. 3. After the honeymoon, what problems have arisen? Now, let's get real. Once the honeymoon phase fades, things start to change. The excitement wears off, and you see your partner for who they really are. But the question is, how much are you willing to accept? I want you to take a moment to think about what's changed. Has your partner started pulling away? Are they becoming less communicative? Have their habits started to annoy you more? Or have deeper issues, like trust violations, begun to surface? When we're in relationships, we often want to rationalize our partner's behavior. But objectively, what do you see? What patterns are emerging? 4. How do arguments unfold? Everyone fights. It's a given. But there's a big difference between healthy disagreements and toxic arguments. So, what do your arguments look like? Do you and your partner communicate effectively during conflicts? Or is it just a lot of yelling, blaming, and name-calling? If your relationship has turned into constant fighting, this is a serious red flag. Healthy conflict resolution is key to a successful relationship. The way you argue says a lot about the future of the relationship. So, ask yourself, how does your partner handle conflict? Are they open to listening, or do they just shut down or deflect responsibility? 5. Are issues being resolved, or are they repeating? This is a big one. Are you having the same arguments over and over, or are things being resolved? If you feel like you're stuck in an endless cycle of fighting over the same things with no resolution, that's a major problem. Unresolved issues build resentment, and if nothing changes over time, the relationship can become toxic. Ask yourself, are these issues temporary, or do they reflect deeper incompatibilities? Are you actually making progress, or just going in circles? 6. Have you reached a deal-breaker point? Every relationship has a breaking point, a moment where things can no longer be ignored. This might be when you find out your partner has cheated, or when they repeatedly disrespect your boundaries. But sometimes, the deal-breaker isn't as obvious. It's more about your personal tolerance for certain behaviors or actions. If you've already reached a point where you can't overlook certain behaviors anymore, it's time to ask yourself, can this relationship recover? Or is it time to let go? 7. Are you settling? This one is tough to admit to yourself, but it's so important. Are you staying in the relationship because it's comfortable? Are you afraid of being alone, or do you feel like you should stay because of external pressure? You need to ask yourself, if this was one of your close friends in your shoes, what would you advise them to do? Would you tell them to stay, or would you gently encourage them to move on? Now, let's dive into 2 scenarios that might feel familiar to some of you. I'll walk you through them step by step and help you see how this exercise can play out in real life. Scenario 1. Alex and Tom's relationship. Expanded version. Additional detailed analysis. As you can see, as we explore these scenarios, the key is not to rush the emotional process, but to lay out all the facts, really digging into the root causes of behaviors and reactions. Let's continue applying the questions from earlier to flesh out real-world complexity, offering examples of healthy versus unhealthy patterns. Conclusion. By following this method, you can find clarity on whether your relationship is truly sustainable or not. It's not an easy thing to do, but it's necessary. It might feel uncomfortable, but sometimes discomfort leads to the most important revelations about your life and your future. Thanks for watching.